Hello, my name is Jim Bates,
And I'm Gene Langenecker.
and we're from Wells Manufacturing Corporation, a world leader in the production and distribution of ignition and emission control components. And we're here today to talk to you about our new ignition module and voltage regulator tester.
That's right. Jim, the tester is a full function tester and has the capabilities of testing both control modules as well as voltage regulators. No other unit on the market of its type.
That is correct. There are many testers out there today. Some we call the tool truck testers. There are some minimum function testers. But this is the only tester on the market today that can completely test all of the features and functions of control modules that control the spark quality and also some of the emission functions that the automobiles today have to pass.
Exactly. One thing we should remember, it is a very expensive piece of equipment and it should always be treated with care just as you would treat your personal computer at home or in the office. So do exercise caution. You want to make sure that it doesn't get knocked off the shelf or whatever, and it's protected because it is a very expensive piece of equipment.
Real good point, Gene. The tester does come with a variety of leads, however, and an instruction book.
Basically, what it comes with is a series of, or the kit contains 22 different leads, of which we have 14 custom leads that are used for the control modules, as well as 7 leads that are designed for the use when testing the voltage regulators, as well as, of course, the one jumper wire. Each of the leads are also identified and coded with a code on it, which is referred to within the instruction manual, and that's very important.
That's right, Gene. And speaking of the instruction manual, this would be a good time to take a quick look to see what's in the manual itself as it refers to the various different features and functions that the tester has. As an example, if we open up the manual to the very beginning, we'll see a page which is very much like your stereo instructions when you buy something for your home stereo.
Exactly.
It tells you what each plug, what each switch, what each socket is for. As an example, this is a dual function tester. It tests modules and regulators. So all of the regulator test functions are in red and all of the module test functions are in blue.
Exactly. Also, within the manual, it explains exactly which part numbers can be tested using this piece of equipment. This is the first listing, which is a listing of all the part numbers or all the control modules that can be tested using this piece of equipment. These are all your most popular control modules and represent by far what are the most important numbers.
Exactly.
Also then the next listing is the listing of all the voltage regulators that can be tested, which are your top 50 or thereabout part numbers within the voltage regulator category. So it does test what are by far the most popular numbers within each category.
It sure does. And I think right now would be a great time to try it out and see if we can test some modules and regulators.
Sounds good.
You know, Gene, most people aren't aware of the fact that when modules fail, most of the time they'll still run the car. Not very well, but they'll still run the car. And that's why you need this full function tester to find modules that are marginal or perhaps even intermittent, but are defective nonetheless.
That's right. A lot of times, as you mentioned, people assume that either a bad module will start or will not start the car, and that is not the case. And that's where the proverbial intermittent problem comes into play.
Exactly. Under each light of our tester, there is a word that describes the test that's being performed, the explanation of which is in our book that comes with the tester.
That's right. What it will do is actually explain to you all the various tests that it performs, which are the major functions and circuits within each control module, and it will then explain also what the drivability or symptoms are. It can be all the way from a no-start condition to an intermittent problem, to a cold start situation, to, for that matter, backfiring or rough idle or anything in between.
Exactly. An explanation that the customer can understand. In other words, if it failed this particular part of the test, the vehicle would perform in such a way and he would recognize that, yes, my car does that. It doesn't run right, it backfires, or it gets bad gas mileage, or I flunked my spog test or something. And each of these tests then is a measurement of the performance for ignition and emission. So you don't have to worry so much about what each of these words mean. If the customer says, well, why is that light on? What does that mean? You can just simply refer to this page and explain that portion of the test and what his vehicle probably is behaving like.
Exactly.
I brought along several modules, and I'd like to start with this Ford module. Here's a common module, Gene, the F121, that we find on later model vehicles, TFI type systems as they are referred to by Ford. It's very popular, and I think that if we show people how to look something up in the book, hook up the lead and turn on the tester, it'd be just the greatest way to show how simple it is to use this great new machine.
Okay, when the customer walks in, what we need to do is identify what part is in question here.
Exactly. I always tell people when they say, can you test this module, the answer should be automatically, yes, I can. What does it fit? What are you going to put it on?
Exactly, because what we really need to do is convert it to what is the Wells part number, because when you go to the section, everything is organized and the pages are all numbered by the Wells part number. So what you have to do is identify the Wells part number, then turn to the appropriate page, and that will show you exactly how to move forward with testing the component.
Exactly. Now we know this is the F121, so we can look up in the alphanumerical sequence that the pages are laid out in, the F121 instruction.
Okay, here we have the instruction sheet for the F121.
All right. Now, as we can see, there are really three ways that you can use to connect this module to the machine. In the beginning, you'll want to notice the picture, because the picture explains quite clearly what the lead looks like and what the lead number is. You could also refer to the written step-by-step instructions, and as you get more comfortable with the tester, you'll probably choose either the picture version or the step-by-step for your own hookup in the store on a day-to-day basis. But for today, we'll refer to all three. We need lead MK, which is this one. And as you can see, this particular lead is configured in such a way as it can accommodate all of the connections of this particular control module.
Okay.
And to connect the module to the lead, we simply plug the harness into the back, and this part plugs onto this top part of the module. Now notice that there is a large connector on the module leads, and it fits the large connector orifice on the tester. The one for the voltage regulator is much smaller, so you wouldn't get these confused as you try to figure out which hole to put it in.
Exactly. That way you don't have to worry about using a voltage regulator connector and plugging it in the module insert.
Right, and then run the risk of incorrectly testing the module and making a mistake. Now once this is all done, we have to refer to the rest of the instructions because we need to know where to set the rest of these switches. First of all, there's a switch down here that designates voltage regulator or ignition module test mode. And we want to make sure that the switch is in the ignition module test mode. The picture up here shows it in that mode. The graphics down here show it in that mode. And of course, by reading the instructions, it would tell you in which position to set the rocker. Another important part of control module testing is this part right in here. This is actually how we program the tester to test a particular module. This is a computer, Gene.
Exactly.
And inside of this computer are programs, factory programs for each of the type of modules that we're testing. And we use this rotary switch to actually select which program this module needs to be running in order to be sure that it can pass all of the different functions that Ford Motor Company, in this case, says this module has to be able to perform.
Exactly, because what it does is it actually puts it in the mode so it simulates the ignition system that particular component fits.
Exactly. Now, here in the instructions, we show the knob turned to position 4. Down here is a much better picture, position 4. And of course, in the text itself, it would say turn the knob to position 4. So I guess I'd better turn the knob to position 4. Okay. Now we're ready to test this F121 module. The power switch must be turned on, and you'll notice that as soon as I turn the power switch on, Gene, the thing starts to go into an automatic test mode. What we recommend you do is ignore that and use this reset button to restart the test every time.
And it's imperative or very important to run the test through 3 times at a minimum, because many times what it will take is running it through the series 3 times for actually to heat up the module to detect those intermittent problems. As a matter of fact, as you run it through the test, you can actually feel in many cases where the back plate will heat up.
That's a real good point, Gene. And the reason for this is, of course, when you're testing control modules in their store, they're only at room temperature. And on the car, they get quite hot. By testing the module 3 times, we can actually bring the module up to a temperature very close to operating temperature so we can detect failures that occur during that time. This has clearly failed the test. We know that because not all of the green lights are on. Notice some of the red lights came on.
Right, because as we start the test, everything will start out with the red light. As it goes through and performs the various tests, as it passes the test, it'll move from red to green.
That's right, and we can actually follow the sequence along. It's very quickly to tell which functions are working and which functions are not working.
That's right, and you'll know when it has completed the cycle because you can hear and there's a slight click at the very end, and that means it has gone through and completed all the various tests.
Exactly. Now this is a module that doesn't work properly. What I like to do by comparison is show you another module that has a problem that this module tester can find, and it basically has to do with the Hall effect pickup. In these particular Fords, there's a pickup in the distributor that this module has to be able to fire up,
Correct,
to run. And that's what this large black connector is for. It has 3 LEDs on it that must be lit all the time during the test to prove that that function is working. And as we hit the reset button on this, we can observe that one of the LEDs doesn't work. And what this means is that the car won't run because the portion of this module that runs the pickup doesn't work.
Exactly. So in other words, it has passed all the 7 basic tests. However, it did not pass the Hall effect test.
Exactly.
So we have a bad module.
Now let's just do it one more time so that we can keep an eye on all of these lights, and we can see this one here never comes on.
Exactly. And by design, once the test has been completed, all 3 lights on the lead will also go off, and that is done by design.
Well, we've looked at some modules that did not pass the test. Let's just look at one that does so that we can see what it would look like when all of the lights on the tester remain illuminated during the test.
And we'll run it through 3 times again just to make sure it's good and that there isn't an intermittent problem that'll surface once it heats up.
Perhaps you can hear a slight click and a buzz at the end of the test. What this does is operates an ignition coil that is actually firing a spark gap. This is the only tester on the market that actually subjects the module to an inductive load, just like it would on the car. All the other testers just use a resistive load, not very conclusive.
Exactly. One other thing we should mention that as it is going through and performing the various tests, you'll notice in some cases they flicker. That again is by design. If it ends up green, it's good. If it ends up red, it's bad. Don't worry about the flickering effect.
That's right. Some of the tests actually test for threshold voltages and threshold currents, and when it flickers, that means it's right on the line. It's pushing it to its limit.
Okay.
And as long as the light still winds up being green, we know that it has passed that portion of the test.
That's really all that matters is where it ends up.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's another module that's very common, which is the GM 4-pin module. This is a DR100, Gene.
Okay.
And I'd like to test this one as well today.
All right. So we will turn to the page DR100. And there it will show us exactly how to hook it up. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, once again, we can look at the illustration. We see that we need lead MB, which I have here. And by following the step-by-step directions or simply the picture on the page, I can connect these leads to the module in this fashion, and the alligator clip is the ground.
Okay.
Once again, the large connector goes into the large socket, and as before, we must turn the product select or the programming switch to the proper number for this module.
Right, and in this case it's number 6.
So I'll turn it to number 6, and we're ready to go. I simply hit the reset button, and automatically the test is performed. The test is performed the same way every time. There's nothing you have to do.
Again, we want to run it through 3 times to make sure
Exactly.
it heats it up.
And one more time. And as we do that, I can feel the back plate is
Right.
getting quite warm,
Okay.
which is one of the reasons why we don't recommend you hold on to these modules while you're testing them.
Correct.
Because sometimes they get quite uncomfortably hot, and you don't want to run the risk of burning yourself. And so this module tested good, Gene, but what I'd like to do is connect to one that is not good. I brought one along that actually doesn't have a cover on it, so that we can see all of those little parts in there, the things that can go wrong and cause one or more of these lights not to illuminate. So once again, I'll simply connect our leads to the module and the ground and hit the reset. And as we watch, we can immediately see that this module is defective because some of those lights have remained red. And there isn't any intermittency in this, is there, Gene?
No, there isn't.
It's testing the same way all the time.
Right.
So this was definitely a defective module, and the customer needed a new one, no question.
Exactly. In this case, this module would not even start the car.
Exactly,
Correct.
exactly. I'd like to do one more, Gene, because there's one feature I'd like to point out. This would be the F102 module.
Okay.
So if you look up the instructions for that, I'll get that module ready to test.
Now this particular module is from a little bit different technology. This is from some of the older applications and actually mounts in the fender wall, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. It's one of the first types of module technology produced, and it has some rather large connectors. And that's what I'd like to point out, is that there is a red line on these connector leads that has to line up with the notch in the connector harness. You could put this one on upside down if you don't pay attention to that.
Okay, and that's very critical.
Yes, and in the instruction sheet, we point that out for you. So be looking for little notes like that where something like this needs to be done. That's very important. What is the product select number for this one, Gene?
Product select number in this case is number 3.
Number 3, and we'll hit the reset. We have a defective module. It's just that fast.
You're right.
As always, we'll want to do it 3 times, just to make sure that there isn't any intermittency, something that wasn't connected quite properly. And you can do it just as quickly in your store, each and every day when your customers come in with modules.
That's right. And one thing we should mention too with the tester is when it's not in use, you should probably turn it off.
Good idea. Well, Gene, I'd like to show everybody how to do voltage regulators right now. But before I do, I'd like to point out a safety feature that we built into this machine for when you're testing regulators, and it's called the short circuit indicator lamp right here between the 2 switches. Whenever there is a short circuit in the voltage regulator, or perhaps you've connected the leads improperly and created a short circuit yourself, the machine will detect that, and rather cause damage within the machine, it will shut itself off and illuminate this lamp to tell you that a short circuit exists.
Okay.
So at that point in the testing, what you'd want to do is turn the power off, and then check all your leads to make sure you're hooked up right, resume power and testing. And if the short circuit lamp still comes on, then we know that the product itself has the short circuit, but you haven't damaged your tester.
Correct.
One of the regulators that I brought for testing today is the VR733.
Okay.
And I'd like to bring that out, and if you could turn to the regulator section of the book.
Okay, and what we'll do is go to the tab section, and again, everything is organized by the Wells part number. And in this case, as Jim mentioned, we're going to be testing the VR733. So we will find that page, and it tells us which connector to use. In this case, we are to use connector RC, which is this connector right here.
Great, Gene. And I'll connect up the RC connector. And as I'm doing this, I'd also like to point out the fact that, once again, the regulator features are outlined in red and the module in blue. So we always know what control feature controls which test.
Exactly, and when we're testing the regulators, you will not be using anything on this side on the piece of equipment.
Exactly. Once again, the connectors are different size, so there's not a chance of hooking the wrong type of a lead into the wrong type of a test terminal.
Okay.
Well now, according to the book, however, we have to select between the ignition module and the voltage regulator, and I'll do that by just switching over to here, the voltage regulator test mode. And finally, we must select between a type B and a type A regulator. Don't worry about those initials. It has to do with the kind of stator winding that the vehicle has, and the book will always tell you which switch position you should be in. So on the VR733, we need to be into the type A position, and when I switch it into the type A position, we now have one more switch to make, and that would be, are we going to test the lamp circuit or the regulator circuit?
Okay. And in this particular case, we have the regulator setting position.
And as you can see, the green lamp has begun to flash.
In essence, what it's saying there is if the regulator's parameters are within acceptable limits, the green light will be flashing. So we have a good regulator here.
Right. Now, this particular regulator doesn't have a lamp circuit.
Exactly.
So we don't need to test for that at all.
Okay.
This regulator is functioning. One of the things I'd like to point out, too, is that when you're testing regulators, it's not a good idea to leave the unit on for more than about a minute. Otherwise, the regulator may get so hot, it would burn your fingers when you pick it up. This voltage regulator, by comparison, is defective, and that is easily seen by the red lamp
Flashing light. So again, we're testing the VR733. In this case, we have a regulator that is either undercharging or overcharging.
Right.
Correct?
In any case, defective, the red light indicates. Most customers don't care what the defect actually is. The fact that they need a new one is most important, and this machine can tell you that.
Exactly.
There's one more we can do today, and this would be the VR749, a Ford regulator that I brought.
And the connector that we need in this case is the connector RF.
And you'll notice that all of our connectors have the automotive type ends on them so that they fit right on. Always remember to connect the ground connection.
And just to make sure that it is hooked up correctly, all the wires are color-coded as well, which again takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
That's a very good point, because sometimes you could put the connector on backwards,
Exactly.
and in those cases the color coding would be able to separate that for you. What type of a regulator is this? Is it a type A or a type B?
This is a type B, Jim.
Okay, so I've switched to type B, and we can see that we're in the regulator test position, and the green light indicates that this regulator is regulating properly. However, the VR749 also has a lamp circuit.
Correct.
So to test that, we simply switch to the lamp function, and the green light is on steadily, showing that the lamp circuit functions.
Exactly. And the lamp function indicates that the idiot light on the dashboard is in fact working properly.
Exactly. I'm going to also plug this one in to show that we have a defective lamp circuit. That's what was wrong with this particular module. Took the cover off, though, just to give you an idea that some of these electronic regulators are very difficult to test. And without a tester like this, it would be hard for you to do this in your store.
Right. Now, in this case, the lamp circuit is not good, but let's check to see if it's regulating properly.
And that part of it does work.
It does work. But we still have a bad regulator here.
We sure do. So you can see the importance of having a tester that can do both the lamp and the regulator circuits.
Okay.
Well, I think that we've shown everybody how easy it can be to test these in the store. Perhaps a recap would be in order. Number one, when the customer brings in the product, whether it be a module or a regulator, simply ask what is the application so you can look up the Wells part number.
Correct.
And once you have the Wells part number, you can refer to the alphanumeric listings in the manual to find the test procedure that you're looking for.
Right, and one other thing we should mention, that as you walk through this, take a minute and do go through and read all the very detailed startup instructions as well. And again, study and look at what are the various module tests performed, because this is going to be very, very important when you explain to the customer exactly what the problem is with this particular component. Again, you may forego a sale at the time, but what you will do is install a tremendous amount of customer confidence and customer loyalty.
That's right, Gene. It's a great tester. It works great. In fact, it's the best one on the market. It comes with an easy-to-use instruction manual, all the lead sets you'll need, and you should have no problem. But if something does come up and you need a little bit of help, be sure to call us at Customer Services. Area code is 414-922-5900, and we'll be able to help you out over the phone.
Well, Jim, I believe that wraps everything up. And what we'd like to do is thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, watching this video, and for supporting our products.
And I'm sure this tester will give you many years of use. Thank you very much.
Thank you.